Peace, peace, peace. This is Rakeem Allah with Wise the Dome TV. And I wanted to just present a build about the history of police in America, especially what's going on. And, I think it's definitely good to know the origin so you can see like what's going on today and how it all connects. So I'm going to build and we're going to go through it like this. So, according to Dr. Victor Kapler, I believe at the University of Eastern Kentucky, he says that slave patrols and night watches, which later became modern police departments, were both designed to control the behaviors of minorities. For example, New England settlers appointed Indian constables to police Native Americans, according to the National Constable Association of 1995. The St. Louis police were founded to protect their residents from Native Americans in their frontier city, and many Southern police departments began as slave patrols. In 1704, the colony of Carolina developed the nation's first slave patrol. Slave patrols helped to maintain the economic order and to assist the wealthy landowners in recovering and punishing slaves who essentially were considered property. This is the slave patroller's oath in North Carolina, 1828. And here's what it says. I do swear that I will, as a searcher for guns, swords, and other weapons among the slaves in my district, faithfully and as privately as I can, discharge the trust reposed in me as the law directs to the best of my power. So help me God. So he's talking about, he's taking an oath to hunt down slaves and search for any weapons that enslaved Africans had on them. And then the key word is trust reposed in me as the law directs. So this lets you know that laws were created just to enslave and police Black people as it's happened today. And I'll make the connection later. Slave patrols, law and violence in Virginia and the Carolinas. Historian Sally Haddon writes in her book Slave Patrols, Law and Violence in Virginia and the Carolinas. The history of police work in the South grows out of this early fascination by white patrollers with what African American slaves were doing. Most law enforcement was, by definition, white patrolmen watching, catching, or beating back Black slaves. And this comes from the book Slave Patrols, Law and Violence in Virginia and the Carolinas. An early form of American policing by Chelsea Hansen. She says, first formed in 1704 in South Carolina, patrols lasted over 150 years, only technically ending with the abolition of slavery during the Civil War. However, just because the patrols lost their lawful status did not mean that their influence died out in 1865. Haddon argues there are distinct parallels between the legal slave patrols before the war and extra-legal terrorization tactics used by vigilante groups during Reconstruction, most notoriously the Ku Klux Klan. After the Civil War, Southern police departments often carried over aspects of the patrols. These included systematic surveillance, the enforcement of curfews, and even notions of who could become a police officer. Though a small number of African Americans joined the police force in the South during Reconstruction, they met active resistance. So this is kind of showing that even the early slave patrols, the early police patrols, and in a lot of cases, vigilante groups like the Ku Klux Klan were really all just doing the same thing, which was to terrorize Black people, to enforce unjust laws against Black people, and to protect white society against Black people. You know what I'm saying? And this is something that we still see to this day. The American tradition of anti-Black vigilantism, Daryl Pinckney. And so he says police forces in the North may have been modeled on Sir Robert Peel's plans for London, but because the jobs were connected to city politics, part of the machinery, the policemen themselves from Boston to Chicago were Irish, people who had been despised when they first came to America, and that they lived next door with Black people told them how close to the bottom of American society they were. So the Irish, knowing that they lived next door to Black people, they knew that they were at the bottom of society because Black people were enslaved or just being freed at that time. And so in every city, the Irish did battle with their nearest neighbors, Black people, in order to become American and to keep Blacks in their place. And so North and South, the police were relied upon to maintain the status quo to control the dark labor force that was feared. And so this is going to show that the Irish, even whenever they became police in the North, were well aware that their duty was to terrorize Black people. And in doing so, this would make the Irish more American and be included within white society. So, I mean, it just goes to show that they saw the benefit of white supremacy and Black subjugation, and they acted on that through becoming police officers. This was from the Negro History Bulletin. This was old paper written called "The Passing of Jim Crow Vigilantes," and so I'll post the link to the PowerPoint presentation in the video, and so I'll let you read it yourself. But it says the law wasn't made for mules and niggers. If they work good and hard and stay in their places, they don't need law. This exhortation from a white South Carolina farmer contains the mental attitude and tradition that long stimulated and sustained the vigilante agents of white supremacy. So here it goes, it's showing that they didn't see themselves as being needed to be policed. It was Black people that needed to be put in their place and forcefully kept apart from white society, or from even kept apart from flourishing within white society. And these vigilante groups who, as we just saw, some were, evolution of watchmen and police groups, or some people were actually in both groups. It says Negro victims, rose rapidly, amounting to more than 4 out of 5 of well over 4,000 known lynched victims. So we're seeing our vigilante groups, were lynching Black people after slavery. Um, it also says that before Negroes were set free from slavery and placed in an ecological position vis-a-vis the white community, the word lynch did not even gain denotation of putting a man to death until fears of malcontent of Reconstruction days inflamed a white belief that Negroes should be regulated. So there's again, this was one way that they regulated us, by hanging us, so we had evolution of slave catchers to police to vigilante groups, all acting and doing the same things. For-profit policing. Policing in colonial America have been very informal, based on a for-profit, privately funded system that employed people part-time. Towns also commonly relied on a night watch in which volunteers signed up for a certain day and time, mostly to look out for fellow colonists engaging in prostitution and gambling. Boston started one in 1636, followed by Philadelphia in 1658. It says that system wasn't very efficient because the watchmen often slept and drank while on duty, and there were people who were put on watch duty as a form of punishment. Well, we know today, police departments today even have a history of substance abuse issues, and like it's nothing's changed. It's very interesting to see that, but there's nothing that's changed literally, and there's statistics that can show and prove that. The first police force was in Boston, and it says, in cities, increasing urbanization rendered the night watch system completely useless as communities got too big. The first publicly funded organized police force with officers on duty full-time was created in Boston in 1838. Boston was a large shipping commercial center, and business had been hiring people to protect their property and safeguard the transport of goods from the port of Boston to other places, says Potter. These merchants came up with a way to save money by transferring to the cost of maintaining a police force to citizens by arguing that it was for the collective good. But obviously, we can see right here it was to protect commerce. It's for profit. and nothing has changed. It's still the same. And in a lot of cases, black and brown people are the ones that are we are how they make profit. You know what I'm saying? But it's a lot of different ways they do, but locking us up is definitely one of them. Slave codes. And so uh, these were laws and restrictions enforced to enforce social control. Slaves, an example of them, slaves could not be away from their owners' premises without permission. They could not assemble unless a white person was present. They could not own firearms. They could not be taught to read or write, nor could they transmit or possess inflammatory literature. That's according to Britannica Encyclopedia. And so, like, this is another example of them creating laws unjustly to that will allow them to harass, imprison, and kill us. The same thing that they did with the war on drugs, the slave codes. Same old policing. Malcolm X said 100 years ago, the American white man used to put on a white sheet and use a bloodhound against Negroes. Today, they have taken off that white sheet and put on a police uniform and traded in the bloodhounds and police dogs, and they're still doing the same thing. And then we know that studies have shown that I think the FBI did a study that the police have been infiltrated by white supremacist organizations. But the thing that they got wrong is that the police is a white supremacist organization. It's not an infiltration that's happening. These are the same people. You know what I'm saying? It's just changing shape and changing form. Martin Luther King Jr. said, when we ask Negroes to abide by the law, let us declare that the white man does not abide by the law in ghettos. Day in and day out, he violates welfare laws to deprive the poor and their meager allotments. He flagrantly violates building codes and regulations. His police make a mockery of law. He violates laws on equal employment and education and the provisions of civil service. The slums are the handiwork of a vicious system of white society. Negroes live in them, but they do not make them any more than a prisoner makes a prison. So he's telling you now that laws are created, but they are only enforced on black people, especially black people in the ghettos of America. And we see that to this day. There's nothing that has changed. Rodney King, March 3rd, 1991, NBC Los Angeles said that through the lens of his camera, Holiday, which was the cameraman, recorded 4 white Los Angeles police officers using batons, stun guns, feet, and fists to beat a black man, later identified as Rodney King, whose name quickly became globally synonymous with police brutality. Now, this was big because it was one of the first instances caught on video. I mean, we all knew that this was a thing, that this happened, that our experiences with police were violent and brutal, but this was caught on video. And so this kind of, shed a light on things. It didn't change a damn thing, but it shed a light on things. The Drug War is the New Jim Crow by Graham Boyd. And so he says that pervasive racial targeting provides another peculiarly U.S. stamp to the drug war. We are incarcerating African-American men at a rate approximately 4 times the rate of incarceration of black men in the South. I'm sorry, let me say that again. Pervasive racial targeting provides another peculiarly U.S. stamp to the drug war. We are incarcerating African-American men at a rate approximately 4 times the rate of incarceration of black men in South Africa under apartheid. Worse still, we have managed to replicate, at least on a statistical level, the same chattel slavery in this country. The number of black men in prison at that time, which was 2001, was 792,000, has already equaled the number of men enslaved in 1820. And this statistic from the ACLU says that black people are almost 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession, even though black and white people use marijuana at comparable rates. And so that's just another example of the law being enforced unjustly on black people compared to not being enforced at all on white people. one of my favorite books from Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow. She says in this book, which I definitely recommend if you haven't read it, one in three young African American men is currently under the control of the criminal justice system, in prison, in jail, on probation, or on parole. Yet mass incarceration tends to be categorized as a criminal justice issue as opposed to a racial justice or civil rights issue. She also says devastation wrought by crack cocaine and the drug war, and the odd coincidence that an illegal drug crisis suddenly appeared in the Black community after, not before, a drug war had been declared. In fact, the war on drugs began at a time when illegal drug use was on the decline. So what she's saying is that the drug war was created while illegal drug use was on the decline. And crack cocaine was introduced to the Black community at a time when illegal drug use was on the decline and the war on drugs had already been ramped up. So it's not a coincidence that an illegal drug war crisis suddenly appears in the Black community, like she says, after, not before, a drug war had been declared. You know what I'm saying? So you really got to understand that there's no such thing as coincidence, especially in these type of manners. And so this all goes into the prison industrial complex. And for those who don't know what that is, Eric Schlossler wrote in an article published in Atlantic Monthly in December of '98. It says that the prison industrial complex is not only a set of interest groups and institutions, it is a state of mind. The lure of big money is corrupting the nation's criminal justice system, replacing notions of safety and public service with a drive for higher profits. The eagerness of elected officials to pass tough on crime legislation, combined with their unwillingness to disclose the external and social costs of these laws, has encouraged all sorts of financial improprieties. So the tough on crime stance that both Democrats and Republicans take is not based in anything other than profits for the prison industrial system. You know what I'm saying? That's pretty much all that this is. This is a for-profit scheme, and we, in a way, to enslave us continually and make money off of us at the same time. Pretty much the same way the transatlantic slave trade and was as far as the slavery complex in the Americas, the prison industrial complex is really doing the same thing. This stat on the side says 2.3 million people are in confinement in the United States. That's more than some countries. You know what I'm saying? Number of people, a number of prisoners held in private prisons in 1999 was 68,000. In 2015, it was 126,000. Bail is a $2 billion per year industry. And it also says that $5.1 million is the combined total that private prison owners, Core Civic, and the GEO Group spent to lobby local and state and federal governments in 2016. So they spent $5 million to lobby politicians to create tough on crime bills in order to keep locking Black people up. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is what we're dealing with. And the police are the people that enforce this. You know what I'm saying? This is how this works. They are the military leg of the prison industrial complex and of white supremacy. So policing in 2021. In 2020, there were 1,021 fatal police shootings. And in 2019, there were 999 fatal shootings. Additionally, the rate of fatal police shootings among Black Americans was much higher than that of any other ethnicity, standing at 35 fatal shootings per million of the population as of March 2021. So as you can see, we still dealing with the same shit from its origin to right now in present day 2021. There's really no change. There's really nothing. It just changes shape. It just changes form. You know what I'm saying? And so understanding what the origin is should help you to understand what you're dealing with today whenever you're dealing with police and the prison industrial complex and what the police job it really is, which is to uphold the institution of white supremacy and white domination, and to bring money to the city and to the state and to the prison industrial complex. You know what I'm saying? So I hope you learned something. Hope you got something from this. But you know, it is what it is. Like and share and subscribe to the channel if you don't already. Peace.